We are live, and today, first time for a long time that we've actually had a chance to have Fernando back on the channel. We see each other quite often now. We had Christmas Day together, Boxing Day, we had breakfast, and then we don't get together online very often. I think that's my fault, not yours, and I apologize for that. And I'm sorry about yesterday.
It's better in person. It's better in person.
It is better in person, you're right. But I have to say, I'm sorry about yesterday. What happened yesterday? Okay, so you go live on Twitter as well at the same time. I don't know if I can do that. Anyway, never mind. What happened yesterday, we have excavation going on around our compound, and apparently somebody just went and pulled out all of the Wi-Fi cabling. And that was done for the day. It literally took 26 hours to replace it. They were here yesterday working. They were back this morning. Maybe they needed a new part or something. But anyway, all sorted this morning. So thanks for everyone. And hello, V, XYYYYX. He's actually called V. So let's get straight into it without any further ado. Venezuela. That's what we're going to talk about. Now, clearly this was not about human rights abuses, because America is the greatest human rights abuser on the planet. It's not about democracy, because they've left the what they say is the illegitimate vice president in place. So it's not about election fraud. It's not about democracy. It's not about human rights. It's certainly not about drugs, because fentanyl was never coming from and has never been mentioned in any. I've been paying attention for a long time. It's never been mentioned in any of the papers that I've read, from the FBI, from the DEA, from anywhere. So fentanyl just appeared on the radar as a problem. What's it really about, Fernando? You've got some inside information here, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been talking to contacts in Colombia and trying to figure out exactly what took place, why it took place, and what are the implications for Colombia and for the region at large.
Right.
So in those conversations, I've talked to people in academia, I've talked to people in journalism, and people who are in politics and hoping to get into politics. So this one was specifically about a lawyer who graduated from Harvard, who shared an opinion with my contact and said, you gotta understand that these kind of operations are not ordered by the president.
Right.
They're actually authorized by the president. What does that mean? It means that the Pentagon has deemed it necessary to do something. And
The
they
Pentagon.
decided, exactly, the Pentagon has decided that it's necessary to do something, and they send this operation already planned, already sketched, and already determined what they're going to do to the office of the president, and then he says, yes, go ahead. Now, I watched your video just now where you talk about the need to get approval from the Congress, and how that doesn't change anything, whether it makes it legal or not. But what I'm going to is, this is a decision made by the Pentagon. Why? Three things that conflate in that geographical location. Venezuela. Number one is, well, China. China has a lot of interests, not only in oil and in other types of infrastructure, but also in helping Venezuela with the extraction of rare earth minerals and other minerals that are very important for weapons manufacturing. We all know the tension between China and the United States with regards to these kind of materials, this kind of minerals that are necessary. To clarify, this is not about the minerals being rare. What is very difficult is to process them and to get them to, well, the purity and the level that are going to be useful for weapons manufacturing. So China had interest, or has interest, in that particular area. The oil, it's very heavy oil, is difficult to get, is needs lots of processing. And yes, the United States might want the oil, but the key key aspect is the minerals.
Yeah.
There is an area called the Orinoco Belt, that is controlled by um, very small exploitation, usually supported by armed forces. So it's similar to the emeralds in Colombia, in which the exploitation is just small capos, small leaders, yeah, armed leaders that control the region. So if you want to go into that region, you have to deal with armed forces and forces that are controlling the area for the exploitation of these minerals. So that makes it um, difficult to deal with them. That makes it important to have good connections in order to get into those areas and get access to those rare earth minerals, or let's call them minerals in general. So that's what is called the Orinoco Arc. Now, the other thing that conflated in this country is Iran. Iran had a program to develop drones and to manufacture drones and to bring drones into Venezuela. These are all military drones. These are not your shoot beautiful pictures. No, these are military level drones and military grade drones that were being manufactured, put together, and stored in Venezuela. There's a report from journalists abroad that have corroborated that this was so. So now we got two very important rivals of the US conflating in one place, creating a thorn on the side for the Pentagon. And the third is Russia. Russia has been helping in military training and strategy, technique, security, etc. So those three elements, those three countries came together at the same time, and the assessment from the Pentagon was this has gone too far. This needs to stop. The lawyer that wrote this was arguing that it is impossible to have drones that can actually attack the United States so close to the United States. It's about 2,000 kilometers or a little bit more, which the Iranian drones have that capacity. So what I argued or counter argued with her is like, well, how far do you think Taiwan is? And there's armament in Taiwan that can reach Xiamen in a matter of seconds. The same with South Korea, same with Japan. But again, I'm digressing. So for our viewers, this is what I want you to understand. The oil is the popular talk. So yes, it might be important. Yes, China was buying oil. Yes, it was helping and supporting the economy of a country that is sanctioned by buying oil. But in the end, that's the popular front. The main reason was it had gotten too dangerous or too complicated for the United States to handle what was taking place in Venezuela. Is it a coincidence that all these three countries ended up participating in Venezuela's defense, economy, security? It's not for me to say. But that's what the assessment, and that's what actually granted the need. It was deemed necessary to do something about it. Something as shocking and destabilizing as flying helicopters into a sovereign country, landing them, putting boots on the ground. When I say boots on the ground, is not like army, but just a few people, and kidnapping the president. That is, we haven't heard anything similar to this since Panama. So
perhaps the invasion of Pakistan and the murder of Osama bin Laden is a similar. That's the only parallel that I can find in recent history.
I felt to say in Latin America.
okay, fair enough.
So, which is why it's shaking the region so much. So we can talk a little bit more about that, or we can talk a little bit about all the different smoke screens that have been used to try and justify these actions. We could start, for example, with the um, the narcotics, right? Oh,
The biggest
this
smokescreen of all, I think, the narcotics, because it's literally false. But
well,
continue.
there's an issue. There's an issue because Colombia is one of the largest, or is the largest producer of cocaine, and that cocaine is controlled by different organizations within the country, and a lot of those organizations are revolutionary armies, right? They're armies that are against the state, against the government itself, and this is why the border is so critical and so important because a lot of the merchandise or a lot of the people who control these crops and this produce, they go into Venezuelan territory. This is known, and they come back into Colombian territory depending on the heat that they are getting from the Colombian government with help until not long ago of the Americans. So it's it's sure that it's helping the drug organizations, and some of it might come out of Venezuela without being the main source of drugs, right? But it's a border that allows for the existence of these organizations, and we're talking here almost the Amazon, okay? So it's very difficult to police, it's very difficult to surveil, it's very difficult to control as a border. So when they see the heat coming, they cross the border, and when that cools down, then they come back in. There is a peace process that is taking place in Colombia. We've had several peace processes through our history. One was in the 90s with the ELN, sorry, with the FARC and the M19 revolutionary armies. And there's one right now, the ELN, which is in that region and all over the country, but basically that's where they finance a lot of their operations through drug dealing. So it's it's very difficult to say that they're not terrorists because these revolutionary army groups are terrorists and they find a hideaway across the border. So that's an issue. And they control the drugs. Some of it might be sold, some of it might just be hidden, or just the leaders hide across the border. They are the ones who control the drugs. So there's parts of it that are true, but not the entire perspective is clear. And this is what I was hoping
Okay,
to.
let me come in there with a question. I'm unplugging my microphone and headphones while you're talking because we're getting an echo, and it seems to be related to my mic. So we have an echo right now, maybe, but I'll mute as soon as I've asked the question. Do you think that having established that there is a Colombian Venezuelan border issue, is that any form of justification for an invasion of the capital city, Caracas, the kidnapping of the president, and then leaving the vice president, who they alleged was also part of this illegal regime? They've left her in place. So how does that kind of justify anything if the problem is the Colombian Venezuelan borderland, and DEA are already working with Colombia? Why can't they work with, as they do with China, an adversarial country? The DEA has 2 offices in China. Why can't they work with Venezuela?
I have 2 or 3 things to say to you about that. So let's start with the first one. The US, together with the Colombian army, eliminated Pablo Escobar. Did that change anything? Absolutely nothing. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is when I lost my train of thought for a second. You were asking me about the legality of this. No matter how you look at it, it's illegal. It's against international law, and it's against the UN Charter, Article 2.4. You simply cannot go into a sovereign country and kidnap the leader. However, I try to communicate what is being said and felt in the region, particularly in my country, Colombia. There is a voices out there that try to simplify the situation as a, I don't agree with this, but I will explain it to you, and then I'll tell you why it's not the same. They say, oh, imagine that you have a domestic violence situation and your husband is beating the wife every day, all the time, forever, and it's an untenable situation. And then the neighbor comes and removes that abusive husband. And all the neighbors around you are telling you, no, no, don't let that powerful neighbor in the penthouse come in and take your husband, because then he's going to steal everything. And then he might want to come and steal from our countries. Don't let. So that's how one very big side of Colombia and Venezuelans in exile tried to explain it. There was no other way to solve this situation. Like, how else would you have done it? Obviously, it falls on its face because democracy would have been the way, right? If you're unhappy with the government, then vote him out. Why do we know that they're not necessarily unhappy with the government? Is because the vice president became president, part of Chavismo, one of a very, very smart lady, very highly educated, that is representing this Chavismo. So there was no real regime change. The mentality, the idea of the great Bolivarian Republic hasn't changed at all within Venezuela. So that's not the point. They could, if they didn't like the government that they had, they could change it through elections. A lot of people point out to the poverty in Venezuela, and when people do that, the ingenuity and the narrative is, oh, they're keeping Venezuela poor, and people fail to acknowledge the effect of sanctions. When you sanction a country that is somewhat has only one big source of income, which is oil, right? Then you're really starving the country. You're really your hand is on the throat, and it's very difficult for the country to operate and to work and to finance its functioning, its functionment. So
Everybody
that's
in China who is over 50 years old would be having some kind of resonance with what you just said. Yes, that's exactly what happened to us 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago. The US did the same thing to China, and they're doing the same thing to Cuba. They're doing the same thing to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and Iran. And then they're saying, well, look at the problems they've got with this austerity, with their starvation, with lack of medical care. And look at that problems. It just proves to you that socialism doesn't work. It proves that religious secularism doesn't work. But it's actually not any of those things, is it?
what it proves is that freedom and democracy, a la United States, hasn't been able to end socialism. That's the only thing that it proves. That is very hard to change, very hard to eliminate these ideals. So getting back to what we were talking about, the legality of things. So number one, eliminating a leader was not going to sort the drug problem. Number two is illegal no matter how you look at it, international law or United Nations Charter. And the other thing is, it is illegal inside the United States. We both commented on a very good video by Media Unlocked talking about what America does to justify the things that they do. I've spoke about it earlier in some interviews, talking about the labels that they use. And that language is always so important, because what America has done, and I'm sure those who follow you probably already understand it, is they framed it as a policing activity. They actually went after a criminal. So that BBC thing that went out on the internet saying like, oh, to our journalists, please don't use the word kidnapping. use the word captured or use the word I forgot what the other term is, but the idea is control the narrative.
Yeah,
If you
he
say
was either
captured,
arrested, I think
yeah,
was the word they wanted, and they're calling it a joint military and police action, and they had
mhm,
people there with police and DEA on their backs, as and they were all, I would have to assume, they were all Delta Force. They were special forces dressed
mhm,
accordingly to kind of prove to the mindless minions who are watching this, look, it's a DEA action. But what, I mean, I'm a former police officer. I've had prisoners who have skipped bail, disappeared out of the country. The first thing you do is you go, when you get in a warrant, you go to their home. And when you go to their home, you say, where's your husband, father, brother, whoever it is, your son? And they say, oh, don't know, he's in Spain, I think, or somewhere like that, which was quite common back in the day. When I was doing this, a lot of people just skipped off to Spain. It was an hour on a plane, and there's no extradition treaty. This was way before the European Union. And the best thing you can do with this is say to them, okay, have him contact me. Have your, whoever is, it's usually a boy, have your son, have your husband contact me, because this is not going away. This stays open for the rest of his life. And if he contacts me, then we'll sort it all out. I can pick him up at the airport, we'll get it sorted out, and we'll get the whole thing dealt with in the courts. But he is going to court. There is no question. And when he comes back, he is going into confinement of some sort, because you don't skip bail, leave the country, and then get new bail conditions. You get put into remand. And so I would have this conversation. I've had this conversation several times with people. And what it is I can't go to Spain and pick up this person. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't do it. It would be illegal. And I can't call Spain up and say, hey, can you pick up this person? I mean, assuming we could do it through translators and stuff, I still couldn't do it. I could go to Interpol and put a red flag on this person, so that if they enter a country that has an extradition agreement with the UK, they can be arrested and then transferred back to the UK. And I would tell this person's mother, wife, sister, brother, whoever it was, that this is what's going to happen. And then invariably I get a phone call saying, what do I have to do? Well, you have to come back. You've got to face up to it. Otherwise, you're going to spend the rest of your life in Spain. And it did happen, because Spain and UK joined the European Union, if it gets to a point where we have a shared legal responsibility, you'll get arrested there and then you'll get shipped back and you'll be here for a long time. If I tell the court that you voluntarily came back after talking to me, it's going to go better for you. And invariably they came back.
The important thing to accentuate here is what America is doing to the world. This new national security book that came out, this writing, is basically taking control of the hemisphere. Again, getting back to the main reason, which was the conflating of these three main countries, gaining a very strong presence in Venezuela. But what we are seeing now, and this is why I said in some of my interviews, but a lot of them get edited out, what the president now, Delcy Rodriguez, does next is extremely key, extremely important, because she's getting threatened by the United States with that whip, right? You're going to let us take the oil. You're going to let our companies go in and get that oil and money, and right, we're going in and taking it, or there will be consequences. So every single pretext that was presented before is now gone, because she's not a member of this Cartel del Sol or de los Soles, right? No, she was the vice president, nothing to do. There's nothing against her in narcotics side. There's nothing against her on the terrorist side. The only thing that is in the way of the United States is that she is now the president. So they need to push her. Once again, removing every single pretext that there might be to go and extort this country. Now, why is that so dangerous? If she acquiesces, as I said in one interview, if she lets America dictate what's going to take place in Venezuela, as they have said it in so many um, 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 press conferences, we run Venezuela, we're going to run Venezuela. Well, all the people who supported Maduro, all the people who supported Chavez, all the people who are still behind this Chavismo movement, well, they're not going to be happy about that. So this is why she is in such a pickle. This is why probably Maria Corina Machado was discarded by Trump. She simply does not have the support in Venezuela to do what he wants her to do. So forget it. Enjoy your Peace Prize, but we're staying with Delcy Rodriguez because at least she has the support of the Chavistas, the people who supported the Chavismo movement. Again, how long can that last? If she started bending over, that might be gone in very short time. And if she doesn't do what Trump wants, then you got more military activity, more violence, more danger for the region. Whichever way you look at it, and as I said on my post, she must be having bottles and bottles of Melanta every single night because she needs to make a decision, and that decision needs to be it's a very difficult decision to make.
Yeah, she's walking a tightrope, and I unmuted myself for a reason there. I was going to ask you this question, because this is an opinion question, of course, neither of us know. Had they removed her as well, they would have needed to bring in troops in order to maintain the TV stations, the hospitals, the government offices, all of those things. Would we then be looking at another Vietnam-style occupation? Do you think? I mean, I know we can't. Neither of us would know this, but I think this might be the most sensible decision that the Trump administration has ever made by not removing her. That's one of the things that I'm thinking about.
Yeah, I mean, they said that they planned it for months, that they even checked that the weather was fine, and one of the things that they probably knew was that she was in Russia. She was away. She very conveniently flew back in right after things had happened. I don't mean anything by that. I don't mean any implications of accusations of treason and whatnot. There's a lot of talk about that. One thing is evident. There was treason somewhere. I'm not saying it was her. I'm saying somewhere there must have been treason because you cannot get to the president of a country that easily, right? Somebody who's under such warnings of what's about to happen. So somebody turn him in. That's not what we're here to discuss. But I wanted to remind our friends and our viewers of the one reason why these experts in Colombia, this lawyer says that this was not about oil. The oil infrastructure is not at the level of exploitation that is going to make a very big difference. When Juan Guaido, right, was their man a few years ago, the oil company, the state oil company of Venezuela, was operating and was actually a little bit in better shape. Fast forward 6-7 years, there's a lot of damage. There's a lot of problems with that industry. So had they wanted the oil, they would have probably done it a lot earlier. So this excuse of going for the oil, you'll see it in the media because it's easy to understand. It's easy to digest. Oh, the oil. Oh, we're going to. Next thing that I want to say, whenever you hear Trump or Rubio, or we're going to get so rich, we're going to get the money, that he's not talking about you, the regular American person. You're not going to get rich. The oil companies are going to get rich. Probably Trump is going to get rich. He said that he's going to control the money of all this oil that was ready to be shipped out, right? That was at the port. Oh, we're going to take that. So it wasn't about the oil. That's what I want to reinforce in this video. It wasn't really about the oil. It was about those other three countries that were causing a threat to
The other
a
three
perceived
issues,
threat.
yeah.
Mhm.
I have something to add about the oil because I actually have some personal experience of this. I don't know how I got this. I mean, my father was an oil tanker driver. He was a ship's captain, and he spent his life going around the world with oil tankers. And for about, now we're going back 67 years, because when I was born, my father was based in Persia at the time, in a place called Abadan. And the reason he was there is because he was shipping, he was port controller there, and he was shipping light sweet crude oil out of Abadan, and it was going to a place in Texas. It was going to Galveston mostly. So the reason was is because Galveston has heavy crude oil, and Iran has light sweet crude oil, and these two things mix together to create petroleum and petroleum products. So this is going back 70 years. That's what my father did. When I last spoke to my father, who's now passed away several years ago, we were talking about, believe it or not, Venezuela. Now, it wasn't topical at the time, and it certainly wasn't under threat from the United States. We're talking about 6 or 7 years ago. And he said the only way you can use Iranian oil now is with Venezuelan oil. The one is no good for anything very much, and the other is no good for anything very much. But when you mix these two together, they become extremely useful for many, many things. One is like oily sludge. I think Trump has actually said this. Their oil is no good anyway. And that's actually true. Their oil is no good. By all accounts now, we're finding out that there is not as much as there was believed to have been. So it's not holding 300 billion barrels. It might be 100 billion, still a lot of oil, a lot of money, but it's actually useless. Then I heard, I think it was Rubio or Ted Cruz or one of those people saying, we've got exactly what they need to mix this, to process this, to refine this, and it's all in Texas. So all we need to do is ship this oil to Texas and we're going to make billions. My father would disagree with that. If he was here today, he'd say, no, you can only make billions from that if you ship Iranian oil into Texas to mix the two oils together. And that was what was happening many, many years ago. South American crude oil was too heavy, Iranian oil was too light, and the two were being refined together to create the products that we need, like petroleum and all the other plastics and stuff that come from this. I believe, according to Trump anyway, this is Trump, who probably it's true, maybe he might have said something true, the oil from Venezuela is going to be good for making roads. So perhaps he's got an idea that he's going to create loads of new infrastructure, and they need this oil for the tarmac or something like that. I can't believe that they think they're going to make a lot of money only on Venezuelan crude, because they need Iranians. So what does that tell us about his next plan, which presumably is Iran?
I need to expand a little bit on the situation with revolutionary armies in Colombia and Venezuela. As I said, that border is so blurred, right? If Trump was just meeting with some oil executives and some of the companies that were thinking about it, right? He was telling them, we need to go and you need to invest and you need to start getting this oil for us. A lot of them were reticent. A lot of them were like, we need safety guarantees. We need security guarantees, because they know exactly how the revolutionary armies operate. It's so easy for these guerrilla movements, for these revolutionary armies to move and start blowing up pipelines, kidnapping, bombing. They operate. That's the way they extort the Colombian government, because the Colombian government in the past was seen as a lackey of the United States. The current president is left-leaning, and he's a thorn on the side of Trump. But if these Americans start coming into Venezuelan territory and start exploiting and stealing these resources, not seeing any improvement in the livelihood of people, or infrastructure. What they do, they just ransack, they pillage and take the resources. We've seen it around the globe, around the world, with the revolutionary armies of Colombia and eventually from Venezuela are going to give them a very difficult time. That's why the next logical move, again, and this is speculation, but is putting two and two together, will be military bases in Venezuela. But we go back to the original point. President Rodriguez accepting military bases in Venezuela is almost unfathomable. You can. It would be the greatest betrayal to Chavismo that you can imagine. But then again, how else are you going to get those security guarantees that the oil companies need? So this oil conversation is, yes, it is a conversation. It could lead to something, but there's so many obstacles that I don't think many people are talking about these, because you got to understand the region, you got to know the region, you got to know how all the different forces that operate in the region. And the military armies can be a real problem for nations and states. I have to speak very briefly about the Colombian situation. We had Maduro, right, going publicly and telling Trump, come and get me, come and get me, come and get me. We had a very similar discourse, a very similar narrative from my president, Gustavo Petro. He even went to New York, took a megaphone, and started telling people in the military in the United States, you do not need to obey illegal actions, which is actually true. They don't need to. And he got a lot of flack for that. He got a lot of, he was attacked quite a lot for that. But now we've had Petro and Trump talking on the phone, and it's all the image, right? So Trump said, oh, it was an honor to speak with him. So Petro said, hey, he says it's an honor. And then Trump says, he called me. So, oh, Trump is a strong. We've got to look at all these things that are taking place in light of the 2026 elections in Colombia. They're absolutely critical to what's going to take place. Because when people ask, which country is next on this whip, on this Trump corollary of the Monroe Doctrine, is it going to be Nicaragua? Is it going to be Cuba? Is it going to be Greenland? Is it going to be Colombia? And a lot of people, because of Petro's rhetoric, thought, oh, Colombia is just a whammy, it's a double whammy.
That's the biggest problem with dealing with Trump. If you play to his ego, then everything is great. Because he's a narcissist. If you play to his ego, everything will be fine. If you insult him, if you disrespect him, and that is what I see as being the major problem. Any country that disrespects him. So Denmark currently is playing to his ego. They're saying, you can have as many NATO troops in Greenland as you want, but we're not going to give you Greenland. That's an issue. Iran disrespects him entirely. Cuba disrespects him entirely. Nicaragua, a little bit different there. But there's a lot of stuff going on. And Colombia is probably the most vocal. Your guy, Petro, is really quite vocal about Trump and this thing at the United Nations. When you said that got him a lot of flack, how did that get reacted inside Colombia? Did they see that as he was brave, he was a hero, or he was an idiot? How did they see it? Because in America it got him a lot of flack. I do know that.
My mental capacity is very limited, so I want you to remind me of your question in a second. I want to tell our audience one thing, and I want you to corroborate this. In a private chat, I said, you will never hear me defending Petro or defending Maduro. That I won't. But I will defend international law, and I will defend the United Charter. The reasons for that, well, you can find them in the chat. I don't find Petro to be a role model or a country, plain and simple. but he is the duly elected president. So now to your question, what kind of flag did he get? As I was talking about this, we're getting elections, and the elections
I've got. I'm
are
going to mute again. Sorry.
okay. No worries.
I've
the
got a drill going on now. It's probably the same guy who ripped up our Wi-Fi. Can you hear that?
Don't touch the Wi-Fi. So let me explain a little bit about the 2026 elections, right? So we got right now Petro, which is a leftist. He was a former Revolutionary Army leader, and he is despised by uh, the far right, the elite of Colombia, because he's removed them from power, basically. Now, the main thing that is taking place here is Gustavo Petro has done two things that are extremely important for the elections. Number one, and it was part of his campaign a few years ago, 3 years ago, was he was going to redistribute land. So it was taking away land from drug dealers. He was taking away land from paramilitary, which is one of those forces that exist in the country. So you have the guerrilla, you have the drug dealers, and the paramilitary are defending the interests of the drug dealers and in cooperation sometimes with the real army. So it's a mess of interest. You don't know who you're talking to. Who are you? Are you paramilitary? Are you army? Are you anyway? So what Petro did was he took away all this land and started giving it away to people in the countryside, to poor people, as a very popularist measure. So his approval rating with that big mass of the population just skyrocketed. It's been 3 years of nothing but adoration towards Petro because of this. What did he do in December? In December, he increased the minimum wage by 23%, when inflation increased only 5.3%. It's unheard of. Again, it's a populist measure. You can imagine the millions and millions of Colombian families that are now happy with more money in their pockets, that they can go on and enjoy life a little bit more. So these two moves have given him an enormous amount of support for his cause. Now, who is the most likely successor of Gustavo Petro? It's a man called Ivan Cepeda. Again, left-leaning. Again, it's seen as the continuation. So such manipulation of state reforms and state policy is going to favor Ivan Cepeda. He is, and there's another thing that Petro did that was interesting, is he cut surveys, election surveys in December. You cannot have any more surveys between now and election day. By 6 months, he stopped that. So now all we know is that Ivan Cepeda has 30%. And the second person, the second candidate, is coming in around half of that. It's a man called De la Espriella. De la Espriella is an American citizen. He has dual nationality. Let's start there. That should tell you quite a lot. The second thing is a lawyer. And he made his fortune, which is calculated in billions of dollars, defending drug dealers, defending paramilitary leaders, and he lives in the United States. So he is coming way, way far behind. And with what Petro has done, chances are that he is going to go on to the second round of voting, if there is one. And that also presents a conundrum for Trump. If Trump decided to go and take him, those masses would come out and vote Ivan Cepeda. Now, if Trump doesn't take him, then Pedro should, oh, you see, I'm a macho. I get to talk to Pedro and sovereignty and blah blah blah, right? So no matter what Trump does, Petro is going to use that to ensure that these programs of left-leaning programs keep on going. A caveat here: 23% minimum wage cannot be done just by executive order, which is what Petro did. He bypassed Congress and did that. So what's going to happen in a couple of months before the elections? Well, Congress and Senate are going to bring it down. So what does that do? Well, it's going to make all this population unhappy. You see, the right took away your money. So it's all politics. We can all dislike politics, as in it's a game of thrones, so to speak. But at the end of the day, this is very likely what is going to happen. So I don't think Trump. This was a negotiated exit. That phone call with Petro. Like, okay, I'll say it's an honor talking to you, and I'll invite you to Washington. What if he is kidnapping Washington? You come to my home and I kidnap you so easy.
I think that might be a red line that America or USA probably would refuse to cross. Once you're a visiting head of state, you are, although it's not formal, you are diplomatically immune. This is a fact of life, and I think any country that were to kidnap or arrest a diplomatically immune head of state would necessarily be a pariah state.
Well, I think that America is already a pariah. When you are kidnapping,
True.
when you are kidnapping an elected president of a sovereign country with your SEAL Team 6 or whatever you want to call it, and you're celebrating New Year's Eve next to Netanyahu, you have really that. There's no red line. It's whatever they want to do, however they want to do it, and any way they want to do it until somebody comes and stops him. That's the next point that we should talk about. This Venezuelan situation it feels different, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, because they've done this all over the world.
it's not your classic coup d'etat. It's not your classic regime change. It's not an invasion per se, although it was an incursion and then get out. It was an invasion, I mean, under the correct definition, but it's not an occupation. What there does appear to be, though, is an administrative occupation, with Hexeth and Rubio saying, and others, Miller as well, they belong to us, they are ours, they will do what they're told. They're going to need to buy American products and we'll sell them to them. But of course, they'll have to buy those products from China and mark them up, I think, because I don't think America makes anything that Venezuelans would want apart from bombs. And America's not going to sell them those bombs and guns. But yeah, Nick says it's a blockade. It is still a blockade, that's for sure. But it's not actually normal. There's something different this time around.
What it did is it broke what it presented the Monroe Doctrine of 2025, the Donroe doctrine, in which they're gonna come and take whatever they want. So every country needs to be on notice because the whip is coming. You jump, and we just like a hungry hippo, we just hammer you and bring you down. I think that that's what looks different, and the helplessness of these countries. I always think of North Korea, why they never go there, right? The helplessness of these countries in fighting comes from a divide that is in every Latin American society. You have the elites, you have the powerful who benefit from having good relationships with the United States. We're talking about massive corruption, massive aid that comes into these countries and all of a sudden just disappears. Remember how the Pentagon loses money all the time? So there are forces inside our countries, as you mentioned in your video, with NGOs, with journalists, with forces that are pushing to overturn co- uh, uh, parties and leaders that are fighting for the sovereignty of our countries. I've shared with you in our private conversations politicians in Colombia who call for the United States to invade our country, political presidential candidates that are calling for America to invade us. How that's why it feels so different, because it was talk, talk, talk in a lot of countries until it happened. So
It was
now
the
we
same in
know.
Hong Kong, going back to Hong Kong, and this is why Jimmy Lai's in prison right now, and others will be too, calling upon, and influential people calling upon a foreign government to come and invade is not right. I want to move on Darren has just put Darren. You met Darren the other day.
Yeah.
Darren has just put a comment up here, which I think reflects what we've talked about before, and also what I talked about in my last couple of videos. Trump can only be stopped by the US themselves. No other country can do much. There's been a lot of criticism about what China didn't do. And I've made a couple of videos to say, well, China isn't really responsible for what the Americans do. If America does something, why is it China's fault that they get away with it? It's the rest of the world's fault? No, it is the fault of the American people because they have a system that doesn't work. I wanted to talk about Trump being under siege, and I see a couple of catalysts there. Whether or not this is going to be strong enough for the American people to rise up against their president, or the American military perhaps to rise up against their president, I don't know how this will work. But it is true, so far the United Nations is a toothless tiger, it's a paper tiger, whatever you want to call it. It's not going to be doing anything about this. And the proper approaches are through the international courts, through international law, the International Criminal Justice Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court. These kinds of things should be doing something. But we've got two countries, and one of them is the United States, and I'll leave the other one, that basically need to be taken out of the unity of the United Nations. But no one can do it. The United Nations can't. I mean, maybe China and Russia could say, oh, we're going to just close down our membership of the United Nations and start something else. We're starting another club for the disunited nations, whatever you want to call it. But something needs to happen inside of the United States, and it's not going to happen without some major upheaval. The Constitution needs to be revoked or reviewed. The criminal courts in the United States, the Supreme Courts, all of these need to be changed. The justice system needs to be changed. The military system needs to be changed. The administration needs to be changed. All of this. What's happening inside of America now? I've got a list of things here. There's 1,000, this is not making American media, there are over 1,000 corporations in America that are suing the United States for refunds in tariffs that they have had to pay. Because, of course, they're all saying, we don't pay the tariffs. China's paying the tariffs. Well, China's not paying the tariffs. The world are not paying the tariffs. Now, some of it is being absorbed, but all of those costs eventually get passed on. And the corporations, 1,000 corporations have joined an action that is going to suing the United States government or the United States administration for tariff recovery. The ICE shooting, which I see there are massive protests going on today. I would say the only unfortunate thing about that timing is that it's in winter, and people are saying, I'm not going to go out and protest, it's too cold. I did see someone say, come the spring, this will be, you'll pay reparations for this. And the comment on the Twitter was, why wait till the spring? It's because it's too cold to protest. Well, if you're not that angry about it, you're not going to be angry about it in the spring. Russia is angry right now because of a fuel tanker that belongs to Russia. It was flagged Russian, has been seized. Now, there's another interesting thing. China has lost no assets from the Venezuelan invasion yet. So China doesn't yet have an axe to grind with America It's done something it doesn't like. It's made its condemnations known. It's called for the release of Maduro, but it hasn't actually said it's going to do anything because there's not much to do.
It's got investments. It's got investments in Venezuela, and
Yep.
for the Americans to actually get to the oil, that opens a whole legal matter, because some of those investments belong to Chinese, so they might need to cooperate with the Chinese to actually get to it if law is respected. So what's going to happen to that is really interesting to see. Now, when you talk about Trump under siege, I think it was Warwick Powell who said something that I would like to share with our audience, that is just, I had so much trouble trying to verbalize it. The permanent state is making the decisions. He called it the permanent state. Um, these presidents, they say one thing, they do a completely different thing. We're done with regime change, Venezuela. We're done with wars. Start a war over here. We're done with this, dude. Like, we know that these presidents are puppets put in place by permanent state, by a group of people who decide which way the world goes, which way the world runs. And when you see America taking control of the entire continent, the hemisphere, what is the rest of the world going to do? That was one of the questions that I asked. How do we, my eternal question, every time I post something, or I talk on interview, I say, who, when, and how is going to stop the United States from so blatantly violating laws? And you mentioned in your video today the extrajudicial execution of the people on those speedboats. I mean, it's a salami slicing. Let's see how much we can do. Let's see what we can do. And the impunity just goes on and on and on. So
that's right. They're crossing so many legal boundaries. The seizing of ships, piracy. Okay, you could say this one's an unflagged ship. Okay, but the Russian one was not. It wasn't unflagged. It was flagged. And they're all flagged, Panamanian or one of the other countries that does flags of convenience. Go on.
Red flag after red flag after red flag.
Yeah.
So once again, it was Warwick Powell who presented the 10 commandments of what we could do, and the call is to call for multipolarity, support international organizations, and make America, isolate America in its own demented behavior. Right? You're not going to engage kinetically against the United States, but there are so many other things that you can do. You can do, like, okay, if Venezuelans can only buy American, well, how about we don't buy American? So, okay, so the Venezuelans are going to buy American, but what if the rest of the world increases tariffs on America? What if we increase the level of trade in currencies away from the US dollar? What if there's so many tools at the disposal of the rest of the world that I think those conversations must be taking place.
I listed them in a video just a few days ago. I listed them. One is the de-dollarization. One is the dumping of treasury bonds, which is already happening. One is the buying of gold, and the changes in the financial structure, which has caused the US dollar to be only 50% of the world's trade now, when it used to be well over 70%, I think. And these are all very, very positive things.
One of those key things has to do, again, I refer to Warwick Powell a lot, the digital Westphalia, which is basically replacing this dependence on software and digital instruments, and replacing them with other ones. China and Russia, they both have systems that work pretty well. The adopting of digital solutions and digital alternatives would actually take away from the ability of manipulating information. I've had this argument with a lot of people. I think there's a Vietnamese commentator on Twitter. I forgot his name. He's a really, really proliferous. He produces a lot of content. And I said, like, listen, we're fighting this fight on Western platforms. This is YouTube.
Yeah. I think that's
Today,
Sony Thang or Sony Tang.
yeah, Sunny Tang, yeah. The day you get too big, Jerry, because I'm out of this game, the day you get too big, you'll be silenced. Or the day you say something they don't like, you'll be silenced. The same on Twitter, the same on, right? So we're playing on their platforms. And that's why they get to control the narrative. Algorithms and shadow banning, etc. They only allow what is favorable to them, what helps with the distraction of this permanent state making decisions in the background. So alternatives to all these shared around the world would be a very good way to share information and kind of like protect the brains and the minds of our people from this manipulation that we suffered, that we are at the helm of the United States. Look what happened to TikTok, right? So the reverse.
TikTok was an interesting thing for me because it took more than a year to happen, and people kept calling it the TikTok ban, which is a misnomer. It was never a TikTok ban. We talked about this before. This was a ban on any platform that the President of the United States feels is a threat to the United States. So whatever we do here, Billy will be next. Someone put up there, introduce Billy, and I like that. I mean, I love the fact that people have suddenly found that they can actually leap the Great Wall. You don't have to leap the Great Wall. The gates are open. The gates are actually open for us inside of China to get out with a pass key, and the gates are open for people to come in anytime they want and see China for themselves. So yeah, introducing Billy, but the moment you start doing that, it'll become another TikTok, it'll become another RT, it'll become whatever it is that the government says, the US government says, we don't want that here. And the real interesting point, you and I have talked about this definitely before, not one of those channels or platforms is banned in China. They choose not to operate, and yet there are many more banned channels in the United States than there are in China. Now, of course, let's take pornography out, because pornography is banned in China. That's for a different reason. It's not political. It's a traditional, cultural, and stuff like that. But yeah, pornography is available in China. If anybody says, oh, you can't get pornography, I don't want to go there, you can get it, but it is illegal. And obviously that causes people to say, oh, but you can't get what you want. Most people in China don't want that. But what they do want is access to the real world. They want truth in their media, and they're not getting it from the US. Banning RT, banning CGTN, CCTV, banning those channels and those platforms is simply hiding from the world. Maybe that's what they want to do.
The article that Arnaud Bertrand published just the other day about his speech in Germany to a group of business leaders speaks volumes. And you and I, we've said this again and again and again, but if there are any new viewers here in the channel that don't know of this, you've got to understand that in order to compete, in order to match, in order to let's say that China was a rival, let's say that China was a threat. Well, you gotta start by not lying to people about what China is. And this is done with the support, the compliance, and the manipulation of Western media as well. The reporting on China is so poor, so biased, so it misinforms people to the point that where you have very high level individuals that believe what they hear. even though we've talked about this so many times, even though they don't necessarily believe the media, but what they say about China, oh, that's what they believe. Being misinformed, not knowing and not understanding China is the best recipe for your demise in the West. Compare that to Chinese. The amount of knowledge that Chinese people have of the Western world just does not compare to the amount of knowledge that American people have of China. They understand the Western world. They understand to a great extent the ways and means of politics and philosophies in the West because they spend a long time studying them. When you close down Confucius institutes, how are people going to learn Chinese so that they start doing what the Chinese have been doing for decades? The Chinese speak English because you only understand English.
Yeah, I had this discussion last night. I went up to a business communication corner called BCC, and a group of business people get together once a month. And I've been invited to several times, and I went up last night, and they're all we were talking. It was my topic actually. I was talking to them. I was presenting to them about changes in cultural differences or cultural differences between us, and I made the point that I was sitting talking to a bunch of people who in their own free time had come to learn about how we, who are culturally different, manage our lives living in China. And it's just struck me that, and I made this point, this is how I opened it, I said, if I was in Australia or if I was in America or the United Kingdom, I don't know where to go to do something like this because they're all being banned. They're all being blocked. And they're like, why? Why would you block that? Because we need to know how this is exactly what you're saying. This is a bunch of business people saying, we need to understand how the Western mind works so that we can work better with them, work better for them even. These were the comments coming out.
Yeah, when people tell me, oh, how can we invest in Latin America? How can we do work in well, first of all, not only the language you need to work in it because not many people speak English over there, but the most important thing is you need to understand the history and where we're coming from, the kind of divisions, the kind of mentality, and it's a completely different map of values that run a country, which make corruption so much an issue. Um, it's insane. It's insane the amount of differences between one country and the other, and they are doing the effort. People want to know, okay, if I wanted to do business in Colombia, what do I have to do? Who could I talk to? So there's a lot of efforts that they make. People like me, who's been outside of the country for 25 years, I still have contacts and connections, and have connection to the country, but you don't hear Colombian people trying to contact me and say, like, how do we understand China? I've never been contacted.
That's my point. They're happy to do trade with China. They're not interested in understanding. And then they'll say, oh, those Chinese people rip me off all the time. No, no one ripped you off. You just misunderstood your contract. A very interesting comment came from a guy who does business with two countries for 90% of his business, the UK and the USA. He's a plastic injection molder. 90% of his business, almost 50-50 of that, is done with those two countries. And he said the really interesting thing about Brits is that before they give me an order, they sit down and they go through every single detail with me. Americans don't. What they do is they say, here's what we need, here's the order, bring it to us, and then there's all kinds of problems happening later. And this is because of this kind of American view of what's called instant gratification, or immediacy, a sense of immediacy on everything. They have to get everything done right now. And then they'll fight and argue with you afterwards about it was done wrong. But the Brits don't do that. There's a really interesting cultural difference. I've got a question for you. I want to wind this up because I have to get to Shenzhen at 6 o'clock this evening, and it's already nearly 4 o'clock. So I'm going to wind this up soon with a question for you. As a Chinese resident for 25 years, would you now feel safe and secure with your investments in Colombia, if you had investments? Would you be putting more in there, or would you be taking money out of Latin America right now? How's your future on the stability?
We've talked about this. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. But by the way, this is not financial advice. Okay.
Yeah, this is not financial advice. I wouldn't. I don't feel safe. I want to cut ties with the country and take all my money and my state out of the country. That's the process that I'm in. I don't trust America. Who does? And if Ivan Cepeda wins, which is a very, very tiny if, it's almost a certainty. When he wins, let's say, and that's just my guess, but it's a very educated guess, well, it's still going to be a thorn on the side for the United States. And it's still going to be very easy for them to put a label on Colombia. Oh, narco state. We're going in. We're going to clean house. And then what? And then what? So I'm against the clock. I'm against the clock.
Where is the exit ramp?
Get out of Colombia, sorry.
Okay, well, I'm happy that you're in China. I'm happy that I'm in China. I put my money where my mouth is. All of my pensions, superannuation, everything that I could get out of the two countries where I've lived in before is now sitting in here. I have a police pension from the UK that I just can't get out. That's paid to me every month, every quarter actually. But I don't have a choice on that one. And if I did have a choice, I'd be cashing it in and bringing it to here. So that's I'm like, go on.
I've been dealing with inheritances since 2015. My mom passed away, then 2018. My dad passed away, and just a few weeks ago, the last of the generation also passed away. So now's the time to just, that's it. From this generation down, detach.
Yeah. The next generation coming to you soon. All right.
In March.
Can't wait. Yeah, well, you'll be doing a live stream like this.
Yeah, like.
All right. I'm going to have to call it a day here because I do have to get going. I've got to get a few things to do before I can leave, and I'm only a couple of hours away. So, thank you very much, Fernando. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. There's some interesting questions come up, some interesting points as well, and I just look forward to the next time we get together and have another chat. So thanks, everybody. Thanks, Fernando. So we'll take a couple of moments to end this stream, which happens all the time, and